Niccolo Machiavelli was born in 1469 in the Republic of Florence. He was an Italian Renaissance humanist, philosopher, and writer. He is also referred to as the founder of modern political science, mainly because of his most famous work he wrote in 1513, titled The Prince. In The Prince, Machiavelli justifies the qualities it takes to not just be a prince, but a leader in general. The Prince consists of guidelines that demonstrates the characters and traits of a successful leader. We found 3 quotes from The Prince that show that Machiavelli's The Prince still has practical applications to modern American politics.
I say at once there are fewer difficulties in holding hereditary states, and those long accustomed to the family of their prince, than new ones, for it is sufficient only not to transgress the customs of his ancestors, and to deal prudently with circumstances as they arise. For a prince of average powers to maintain himself in his state, unless he be deprived of it by some extraordinary and excessive force, and if he should be so deprived of it, whenever anything sinister happens to the usurper, he will regain it.
Dad, when you watched as he was a president, and you would turn on the television to hear critics talk about him.
It made me angry. And I wasn't disciplined enough not to watch television. When I became president, I was disciplined enough to ignore all the noise. But when he was president and people criticized him, I didn't like it. But it helped thicken my hide for when I became president, because criticism...
In The Prince, Machiavelli talks about the advantages of hereditary states. In the previous clip, President George W. Bush talked about how having his father as president helped him when he eventually became president. Throughout the history of the United States, political dynasties have been prevalent. For example, the Rockefellers of the late 19th century and the Kennedys of the early 20th century. These 3 families have had tremendous impacts on the American political landscape.
He who obtains sovereignty by the assistance of the nobles maintains himself with more difficulty than he who comes to it by the aid of the people, because the former finds himself with many around him who consider themselves his equals, and because of this he can neither rule nor manage them to his liking. But he who reaches sovereignty by popular favor finds himself alone, and has none around him, or few, who are not prepared to obey him.
Charlie considers me a great businessman, but not necessarily a politician. I don't know. Maybe someday you'll say I'm a better politician.
Well, you haven't spent.
Actually, I'd like to. I love being a great businessman.
What I admire about you is you probably haven't really spent a dime, and you're number 1 in the polls. How much have you spent?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a very funny thing, because I have to report it, so I can tell you. I'll do a little bragging, but so I've had so much television. Like this interview, I thought this was going to be. Maria's brutal, Charlie. I thought this would be 3 minutes. I just got back from New Hampshire last night, where we had a tremendous success, and. Maria might keep me on this phone all day. I'm trying to be nice.
There are worse people to speak to.
This has to be a total education for you. I mean, I know you've been all around the world and you've done a lot of stuff, Donald, but this is totally different.
Okay,
what has been sort of your big takeaway from this whole running for president?
Well, let me just answer Charlie's question, because it's sort of an interesting. So what happened, I figured I would have spent about $10 million by this point, right?
Right.
I spent nothing.
You spent nothing.
I spent nothing. Charlie, I've
You know what? You are the best politician out there. You are the best politician out there.
Listen,
you broke me.
Machiavelli would support Donald Trump's action of self-funding his campaign. In the quote, Machiavelli claims that it is important to obtain sovereignty with no assistance because it naturally gives you more power than if you accepted financial support. In modern-day politics, the amount of money that super PACs contribute to candidates is enormous. In 2012, President Obama raised $15.6 million for his campaign from the financial sector. This past year, Senator Bernie Sanders refused to take money from super PACs. This, according to Machiavelli, would be a more favorable action by a political leader.
For this reason, I consider that a prince ought to reckon conspiracies of little account when his people hold him in esteem. But when it is hostile to him and bears hatred towards him, he ought to fear everything and everybody. And well-ordered states and wise princes have taken every care not to drive the nobles to desperation, and to keep the people satisfied and contented, for this is one of the most important objects a prince can have.
Now, I have to go back to work on my State of the Union speech, and I worked on it till pretty late last night. But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
Machiavelli states that a true leader thinks little of conspiracies against him if he believes that his constituents support him. When President Bill Clinton was accused of having intimate relations out of wedlock, he renounced these accusations, even though they were very true. Compare this to Richard Nixon, who stepped down in light of the Watergate scandal. If Nixon had followed Machiavelli's writings, he would have denied the allegations and relied on his existing support from the American people.
Machiavelli's political writings have direct relationships to American political hereditary rule, campaign money, and presidential conspiracies, showing that The Prince, while written over 500 years ago, still has direct applications to politics today.